Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we got new product launch, something Iron Rock's been working on for a while. We have the Trail Tamer 2.0 Hydro Bump Stops. So these have the best zinc coating we could possibly put. We live in Minnesota, salt. We've had issues with corrosion on these. Each one's gonna come with its own sleeve for custom applications and double jam nuts. So you don't have to worry about it going anywhere. So we're gonna get these installed today on one of the owner's diesel JLs, and we're excited to see how they do. So before we get this up in the air and start on our install, just want to let you know this is our boss's daily driver and one of his wheeling rigs. This has been out to Pritchett Canyon, this has been up to Gilbert. They've had this all over the place, so it's got some scratches, got some rust on it. It's actually used quite often. So just a couple of things we want to point out before we start tearing anything apart. So this one's already got our stackable bump stop extensions in it. So this one's already been dialed in. So there's going to be a little bit of a difference here. We got a 1-inch gap from our landing pad to our rubber, and then the rubber will squish about 1 inch. So this one essentially has about 2 inches of up travel. Looking at the shock, I think we can get a little more up travel out of it. So we're going to bump that up a little bit. But once we get this installed, we'll start talking about the travel on this and what you want to set your bump stop at. But you want to know what that measurement is before you tear anything apart at ride height if you already have them dialed in. If you don't have them dialed in and you're kind of doing this in the middle of a new lift and all that, well, you're going to have to start articulating that axle and get it dialed in that way. But it's a good number to know right off the bat. So we're going to get this up in the air. We're going to get all of our springs and shocks detached, droop the axle out, get the old stuff out, start cutting, get the new ones in. All right, so we're up on the hoist. We got it drooped out as much as we can. We've got our shocks disconnected. We got our sway bar ends disconnected. It's drooped out right now. With these bump stops, we're gonna have to take these out with the springs, so we'll have to spin these off. We're gonna have to get our spring compressor on here, compress that, pull it out the bottom. That'll give us access, then we can start pulling some measurements on our upper cups and get those cut. These help a lot. So we got our spring out, that was fun. So now we're ready to start measuring and cutting to put our new bump stop in. It's basically gonna take place of the existing housing. So what we gotta do is bump up straight here, measure down 2 inches, get a flush cut all the way across. We'll take our top 2 jam nuts off, slide it up through, and jam nut it from the top. Mark it more than one spot. You can take tape, wrap it around so you have a straight line to cut against. I've done that in the past. This one I'm just going to eyeball and cut as flush as possible. You can always clean it up with a grinder after, because you can take a little more off than what the measurement is, because you have that adjustability to make this smaller. So that's what we're gonna grind it flush after. So we're ready to cut off our bump stop. I know I said I wasn't gonna use a grinder, but I'm gonna use a grinder to get my starting line, and then I'm gonna sawzall it all through so that it's not jumping around. So just one thing I want to point out for you guys, you can cut this up, you know, another ½ inch. It doesn't matter. What matters is when you put your jam nuts on top, that the same amount of threads are showing on top on both sides. So if you have to grind the hell out of this to make it flush and flat for a good seat for your jam nut, that's fine. Not a big deal. So just try and get it close. Don't touch the top. Set your jam nuts the same. It'll be good. Fucking birds in the way. So first off, I apologize for the air compressor, aka Darth Vader breathing back there. So before we put our bump stop in, put whatever isolator you had in there back in, because most likely it is not going to fit. And then we're going to anti-seize where our threads are going to lock on, or the whole thing if you want to, you know, be coated in the thing for hours. Good zinc, so you don't got to worry about this section corroding, but if you ever got to make an adjustment later, you'll thank yourself. I'm going to try my best to not get coated in it. So now that I'm thoroughly coated in anti-seize, make sure you put your upper isolator back in, because it will not clear those. Collar down. Thanks, camera guy. Everybody give the camera guy a thumbs up.
I do what I can.
And then a little bit of a bump in there. You want to put that between, so when you're tightening down the collar with the spanner wrench, you got a little bit of room. Boom. So again, doesn't matter where you cut it here. Set your threads up top here to be the same on both sides, because then this will be in the same spot on both sides. You can adjust the bottom. That's not going to change anything. So just make sure up here you got thread showing, so you got good thread engagement. I still got to tighten this down. So these are going to be available on the website as well. Spanner wrenches for these hydro bumps. We're going to loosen up our top one, line them up so we can drop our spanner wrench on. Bottom collar is tight. Snug up our locking ring. And there we go. So that one's in. Now we're going to have to put our stackables back in with our spring. Might have to drop it to the ground, check our tolerances, and see if we got to pull the spring back out to adjust that stacked height, but should be pretty close. All right, so this is roughly where we're gaining here. So we're going to have to take a little bit of our bump stop out of our stackables. I'm guessing probably the 1/2 inch one. So we'll give that one a shot, get the spring back in, let it set down. We'll pull some measurements and hope we don't have to take it apart again. All right, so we got our spring back in. We've got our, what we hope is our final bump stop set. We're not going to do the other side just yet. We got our springs in. We got our shocks reattached. We're going to drop it to the ground and check our measurements before we get too far done with one side before we move on to the other. Getting kind of towards the end of the day. The boss probably wants to leave, so we'll see. So we got about 1.5 inches roughly, which isn't a bad number. So we're going to flex this thing up just to make sure our tires are going to clear and then we have enough shock for the up travel. But I think we nailed it. I think that's going to be money.
It's kind of hard to see.
It is. All right, the other side looks pretty good. So we're going to quick bust out this other side, make sure everything checks out, and let the boss go home. And that's why I shouldn't have used a grinder the first time, because that is money. All right, so we finally got our bump stops in. Driver's side took a lot longer once we knew our measurements and everything. Passenger side took about 1/2 hour. I will say that the spring compressor makes life a lot easier. You may end up having to, drop that axle even farther. We didn't take off the drive shaft. All we did was drop our shocks and sway bar links. So that gave us enough. Driver's side fell right out. Passenger side came out pretty easy with the compressor. Go slow, make sure your cuts are nice and flush. Passenger side with Sawzall only, got a much better cut instead of trying to grind it all flat. But we're going to get these out. We're going to go flex them out, go beat the heck out of them, and move on to the next project. Thanks for hanging out. Like and subscribe. Drop a comment, a like. Maybe tell us what we want to do next to the JL, what you guys want to see. Thanks for stopping by.